that a religious explanation is far more plausible than a reductive materialist explanation, which I think you may be offering, if I understand you rightly.
I suppose.
In that case, I find the religious explanation much more holistic, able to take on board all of the factors that are involved.
I'm being interviewed here.
You are. What's the job again? I can't remember the job again. So that's what I'm saying. That it's a holistic explanation. Your explanation reduces things in an implausible way to a materialist basis.
Okay, so my problem with the point that you're making, not only does postulating a soul not provide the explanatory power that you claim that it does, because it doesn't explain the mechanism behind it. Just saying it's the soul coming through the body and it's the soul fading away, and or however you actually explained it. Four mics. You guys are really serious. Yeah.
This guy wants a mic.
But so not only are you not explaining the causal mechanism through which that is the soul expressing itself, but it can also be explained in a similar way by, DMT being released in the brain, which is another phenomenon that we know exists, right? When people take psychedelics, they have out-of-body experiences. We produce exactly that same chemical when we die that produces those psychedelic experiences that can allow us, in the same way that you say it's the soul, I could say no, it's just the brain going on a hypercharge before it dies, right? It's like when batteries go through an electric power surge before they die, when they're in the very last legs. It's just the mechanism of the brain. There's no real difference in our explanations. It's just that I'm making a physicalist postulate, you're making a non-physicalist postulate. But there's no way that you can back yours up through pure empiricism. It's just that you have to postulate it. And I accept that you might postulate it, but it's not any better empirical standing than it's just a faith-based, it's a belief-based argument, right? We accept that. So how, through what?
It's an inductive.
Explain your induction. Explain how the soul is expressing.
What I mean by induction is it means observing phenomena which until now have been not mainstream because of the taboo associated with these. Like, people don't want to talk about these things because they're afraid of being stigmatized as possessed in the olden days, or now as being mentally ill, or you get referred to as psychiatrist. So people don't want to talk about it. But that is changing now, thank goodness, in the last 10 years, 15 years.
Absolutely.
And now, amazingly, mainstream academic research, particularly in the United States, but also in places like Holland and elsewhere, are now actually doing research on this. And what they are discovering is absolutely incredible, astonishing. They're actually narrating accounts which should be physically impossible by any understanding that we have today. So, as I've already mentioned to you before, where you have people who are born blind and deaf, have a near-death experience, and whilst they're dead and blind and deaf, having out-of-body experience, they're looking down upon themselves, they're observing what is happening accurately, what they're hearing, and when they're resuscitated and they recover, they're able to tell their healthcare professionals, oh, you said this and this, and you did this. I noticed when I was observing what was going on. This is someone who's dead and blind, by the way, all right? I noticed that you were doing this procedure and you were doing that procedure, and the healthcare professionals, the doctors and the nurses and so on, accept this is exactly what actually happened. And this is evidence inductively, so I'm not starting from a theory, I'm saying from, well, this is very peculiar. How do you explain this? So what the research, and I mentioned to you also some academic research at the University of Minnesota, you can access it online, I've read the research, and they look at people who've been born blind and deaf, who had ND experiences and had these extraordinary experiences. And they corroborated them. Were there any witnesses, any independent third parties? Yes, there were. Yes, they are, as they said they were. And also went through possible physical explanations. You mentioned some of them, like these biochemical reactions in the brain. So they have found all of those not really at all of any explanatory value. They do not actually explain the phenomena that you and others have claimed for it. So this is a mainstream academic discipline now, and what they're uncovering is extraordinary. For me, it suggests an understanding of the universe and ourselves, which is no longer just materialist, it's much more holistic. So it includes what I would call, I'm not fussy about words, you can call it a soul or a spirit or whatever, consciousness, but consciousness, it seems, is not just a byproduct of the brain, it has its own independent reality which exists beyond the brain's demise and has a life of its own. And this points to a spiritual dimension, I deduce inductively, that religious people would call the spirit or God. So it's all interconnected in a rich, holistic understanding. That I find compelling, convincing, based on empirical observations.
Okay.
Your insistence it must just be
Can
this, that, and the other is not persuasive.
So
Not persuasive.
it's okay. I've got two questions. Number one, how on earth does
Yes.
a person who's been deaf and blind their entire life have an out-of-body experience and know what they're seeing? How do they know that they're seeing themselves being operated on? How do they know what colors are, what people look like, if they've never experienced these things in their life, unless they're being given divine knowledge, which, again, it's an unjustifiable postulate. That's just, because they do this, they must have had
It's a very
God,
simple answer.
and therefore you just have to...
Very simple answer.
God.
I've seen YouTube videos where you have like a boy of 10 or 12 who's born deaf, suddenly be given a cochlear implant. Like my sister had this, she had meningitis.
Yeah.
Anyway, she's given an ability to suddenly hear again for the first time in her life. And you can actually see the guy. Suddenly, he can hear the world around him. Hang on, and he knows that he can hear it. He's like, "Whoa!" And you can see the big. But he
doesn't know that what he hears as a bird is a bird singing. I don't know that.
No, but he does.
No,
but he does. No.
Of course you don't.
He understands. He is hearing.
What it is just by virtue of
he
having
knows
that
it.
ability.
Sorry, he understands because we are meant to hear. We have ears.
Sure.
That what was not working is now working. So it's native to us in a properly functioning brain to actually be able to hear. So when he suddenly hears again, it's not like this alien thing that is apart from him. It is an awakening into a world which he is a part of. So he's come home to the way he should be living.
With this person,
and similarly with you, now I can't speak to what it's like to be born blind and have that vision because I have no idea. But they feel that they are actually seeing real things, and they are independently corroborated by healthcare experts that they really must have seen it because it's exactly what happened, and that is physically impossible by your understanding of reality.
So would someone who is suddenly able to hear understand a language that they know how to speak, they know how to write, but they can't write? I wouldn't know if I had been deaf. I wouldn't know what words mean. I wouldn't know what they sound like. I know how to speak them.
Good question.
I know how to write them and read
But
them.
these people are unquestionably hearing, though. No one denies that a cochlear implant will make a person hear.
My point being,
so it's real hearing and analogous to things. Yeah.
My point being that if someone has been born blind and deaf, and then they've had this near-death experience where they've seen and heard, so as you claim,
no idea what's going on. Just the usual speaker's call.
Rhetoric bullshit. If as you claim, they're hearing and seeing as they never have before.
Yes.
Then under what possible mechanism can they understand and make sense of what they're seeing?
But they do.
No, but you're saying they do. You're saying that they understand, this is me on a surgical table and I've got doctors around me. If I've never seen those things, I don't know what they are. If I've never seen them,
I understand your point. But
the
the point is this, I can't speak to your answer in that I've never been in that situation, but yes. I can say from the reports on this that the literature on this is vast now and academically period. If you look at the literature, people do actually objectively view things, and we know that not just because they say so, because it's independently fact-checked by people. Hang on, let me finish. So we know that the experiences they have are authentic because you couldn't just imagine any old random stuff and get it right like that. It would have to be real. So I'm not bothered about how the veracity of it is checked out. How do they really understand a doctor as a doctor? But the fact is, if they see a guy in a white coat doing the surgery, and they actually observe that accurately and report, well, he did this and this and this. Whether or not he really understands what a medical doctor professionally
how can he report
is
it
not
if he
the
doesn't
point.
know what it is?
But he does.
But how can he?
What?
If he doesn't know what it is, then how can he? Well, I haven't read the literature
so
to directly.
This would be John Locke then about sense perception. Can people have sense perception of medical procedures and accurately report a man doing this and the colours and the noises and the sounds? Can they report that accurately whilst not perhaps understanding the full depth of what's
not
happening?
Understanding any depth of it.
Well, no, they must
have
have some understanding because they report a human being doing so and so. They have some understanding. This is what they report. Now, you may not understand how they can do that, but do they report it? Yes. Is what they report accurate? Yes. Over and over again in peer-reviewed situations that are fact-checked by independent witnesses. This is all fact. you can't, in the face of that, dogmatically insist that none of this is real. I think that's unscientific
I agree.
and against reality.
So that is not the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is that your justification for it is equal to mine in that there's no way that we can prove it. It's purely an axiomatic
We can
problem.
fact check it.
No, but it's purely an axiomatic difference, the way that we explain the causal mechanism.
How do you explain a blind? How do you explain a blind dead person
How does the
who has an
soul-
out-of-eye experience actually accurately observing what's going on at a car crash scene or in a surgery and giving in-depth narrations? All of this happened because they say they saw
How does the soul
it.
justify it any better than DMT?
How do you explain that? The DMT
doesn't.
doesn't explain
they
this.
explain it in exactly
No,
the
it
same
doesn't.
way.
No, this
of course,
is-
it postulates
but you said you
God
hadn't
to
read the
explain it.
literature.
It doesn't explain the causal mechanism.
It's interesting.
behind
You
it.
said you hadn't read the
I haven't
literature.
read the literature.
But you see, this explanation is discounted in the literature.
Yes, but my point is that you ought to discount.
So what
the
is your
soul.
explanation?
You ought to discount the soul as a justification for
Why?
it as well, because there's no explanation of a causal mechanism by which you are able to perceive this out-of-body
Do I
experience.
need a causal explanation?
Of course, if you're
Why?
making a postulate that the soul exists, then you have to explain why the soul's existence justifies.
Okay,
this
I mean,
experience.
normally I hate analogies, but I'll give you an analogy.
Okay.
You've done physics, haven't you?
I'm doing physics.
I've not done. Oh, you are doing physics.
Doing
okay.
physics.
I will confess, I've never studied physics in my life. When I get in an aeroplane in a couple of weeks' time, which inshallah I'll be doing, I trust that when I get on that British Airways aircraft that's going somewhere, I trust that the physics and the geometry and the engineering is all going to work. I have
Unless it's Boeing.
unless it's
Yes.
well, we'll go there. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Assuming it's none of that, I have no idea about the laws of physics. But I actually have a really confident trust that this aeroplane is actually going to, obey the laws of physics
Yeah.
and get me from A to B.
Yeah.
Does that make my confidence in that belief invalid?
No, because it's falsifiable. It's derived
No,
through
no.
a falsifiable process.
But is
which
it?
explains causal mechanism.
My question is it valid?
No, it's not valid to.
Oh, it's not valid.
Disbelieve.
My confidence in this aircraft
Oh,
being
no,
able
your
to.
confidence is justified.
Right, but,
yes.
okay, but by the way, I've already confessed I have no idea about the physics
Yes.
of that aeroplane actually
Absolutely.
flying. So this is an analogy, of course.
Absolutely.
So coming back to the original, do you see my point?
Not
Even though I
exclusively.
can't explain
you could explain
hang
if
on,
you
the
knew
cause of the solar, but I can't explain the mechanism. I'm excited if you don't know, to be
You
honest.
could
But you
learn
could
through
you
the
could see the
science.
outcome of the effects of it regularly and independently fact checked by healthcare professionals who say, yes, this person who was dead and blind did actually, according to their testimony,
I don't
did
doubt that
reliable
this-
see.
I don't doubt the
Now, the fact that I don't
phenomenon
know
exists.
any more than I understand the physics that would take me in a BA airplane to my destination
Sure.
is not
But
an
there's a
argument
distinction-
against it.
But there's a distinction to be made.
Do you see why it's not an
Yes,
argument
yes,
against what?
absolutely, but there's a
Good.
there's no argument. I'm not making an argument against God. I'm saying that your argument
We're not
for
talking about-
God
we're
is-
talking about God here.
Or soul. sorry.
Whoa.
I'm not making an argument against the soul. I'm making an argument that your argument for the soul doesn't justify your postulates. Your argument through this
Yeah.
observation of this phenomenon.
But I
doesn't
still don't
justify
know
the
what your argument
conclusion
is.
that it's
Your
a soul.
argument doesn't seem
There's
to
a
be.
distinction to be made between the airline analogy and the soul
Good.
analogy.
What's the difference?
With the question of the science,
Yeah.
you can study and you can understand why an airplane flies.
Yes.
You can go exactly
Yeah.
through every single mechanism
Yeah.
of the airplane, and it will causally explain why when you sit in that airplane, it will take you in the sky and you'll end up in your other destination,
Yeah.
right? It produces lift through the turbines in the
Exactly.
engines,
Well, there you
and
go.
it has flaps. and-
Now I understand why it is I can
I
fly.
don't even understand
Thanks
the
to you.
entirety of it, but
Right.
it can be explained
Yeah.
through purely physicalist, purely empirical, falsifiable
Right.
science, which
Right.
has been done. We've made testable predictions, and
Yeah.
we
And-
adjust
and
our
airplanes
conclusions,
do fly.
and they do fly.
Yeah.
We know this.
Usually. Yeah.
Usually. We know this
Yeah.
because we have falsifiable
Absolutely.
evidence and methodology through which we
So
can determine the best
how does that
explanation.
relate to my original point?
When you say, "Oh, I don't know how the soul works,"
Yeah.
you can't know how the soul works.
Oh, why?
Because it's entirely separate from this.
Can't. So the
Can't explain a
so
causal
suddenly
mechanism.
this word can't has appeared, and I don't.
You can't explain a causal
Where does that come
well,
from?
until you explain the causal mechanism.
No, no,
there's
no.
explanation. Or explain how I might derive
No,
the
no.
knowledge of
Are
that
you
causal
saying in
mechanism.
principle it's impossible?
Yes. I'm saying it's
Okay.
epistemically impossible.
Why
to
is it impossible?
understand.
Where do you get that knowledge from? That's impossible epistemically.
Because there's no testable prediction that you can make to justify it.
Okay. Well, I've already given you a repeatable test. No, hang on.
No, you haven't. You've expressed that this phenomenon exists. You've said many, many times, right? We can look back at the camera footage. You probably said 4 or 5 times that this phenomenon exists. and you say, you know, it's impossible for it to happen, and then you say,
It is.
so it must be the soul.
So they say.
It is,
So they
it is.
say.
But then you say, so it must be the soul. But you're making that leap without really justifying where that leap is coming from. You can't explain the causal mechanism that explains the soul's justification,
Okay.
how the soul can experience whatever.
I don't have to give a detailed...
Of course you do.
No, excuse me. I don't, any more than I do about the aeroplane flying before I get on an aeroplane and trust it to actually take me to my destination, because it works. In reality, it actually happens.
But there is someone
hang on.
who can give that explanation.
Yes, they can. But the fact that science at the moment, which is just beginning, or academics are beginning to look at these phenomena seriously, like NDEs and people approaching death who have no brain matter left because of cancer, nevertheless have exactly, and you suddenly become fully conscious and aware and start talking again to say goodbye to their loved ones. The fact that I don't understand that, analogous to the aeroplane thing, doesn't bother me overly, because we're in the infancy of our, hang on, the infancy. And therefore, just because we're in the infancy of understanding is not an argument against the reality of the thing we're in the infancy of understanding.
I agree.
Therefore, your dogmatic rejection is premature, to put it politely.
Okay, so I will agree that it's a premature rejection. If I entirely reject the existence of the soul based on the fact that we can't explain it,
Exactly.
absolutely, that would be
That's my
unjust.
argument.
But
You agree then?
I don't think I've made that point that the soul doesn't exist. My point is that it's not a sufficient explanation. As you say, we're in the infancy of science.
Yet.
You know, humans 150,000 years ago saw that birds fly. They might not know how, right? They see flapping wings, but they don't understand the physical mechanism through which that works.
Exactly.
But you know, they said it was magic, right? You know, the sun rises in the morning. It's Apollo riding his chariot through the sky. Whatever possible explanation.
That was always poetry in Homer.
But it was postulated, right? There's postulates. As science develops, we discover in almost all cases where we thought it was magic before, we thought it was something metaphysical, we've almost always proven that there was some physical explanation behind it. And my point is not that the soul doesn't exist. My point is that you're using the soul to justify some phenomenon is entirely unjustified, given that the science is in its infancy.
No,
given that we don't know enough about it to say that it's a soul, and therefore, I mean, this originally stemmed from our conversation about free will and about God, which was God.
Well, that was
an hour
ages ago, yeah, wasn't it? Yeah.
But it originally stemmed from that. To say that there's a soul because we don't understand something, and therefore God, which I'm not sure if you're still using this as a way to justify God, but I presume that the soul and God are probably somewhat interlinked. It's not justified to make that further postulate because we don't understand.
Okay,
right.
This is taking us back to deeper issues here to do with the nature of Western science. And my disagreements with some aspects of the way Western science has been done over the last several hundred years, and that my reading of it ever since the Renaissance in the West, science predates that. In the Muslim world, science was very advanced in medicine and surgery and physics and other areas. But in the West, it took a decidedly materialist turn under people like Bacon and others, and it became militantly anti-God, anti-metaphysical, exactly. And
I think that's a misunderstanding. Can I explain why?
Can you let me finish? Because you had I'm giving you my response.
Of course.
Pardon. So I think that is the case. Clearly, we can look at the works of people like Thomas Hobbes, for example, one of the, and his readily insistence, Descartes and others, on looking for materialist explanations. Now, materialist explanations kind of work in some areas, but in terms of an explanation for whole of reality, there's a philosophical assumption packed into this, which is not intrinsic to the scientific method. I believe.
Absolutely.
But a lot of modern science in the West works on that assumption, and this is unfortunate. Now, there's a great work, which I've mentioned to you before, by Professor at Chicago University called The Structure of Revolutions on the Paradigm Shift. And I mention that because it's absolutely a key work in this whole area of philosophy of science, of course. And I reference that because I think now we're ripe for a post-materialist paradigm. What I mean is, the universe can be investigated physically, but there are some phenomena increasingly important to our observations of reality which cannot be explained on that basis. And many scientists in the West are still dogmatically insisting that we dismiss these phenomena because they don't fit in with science. But for me, this is a particular kind of scientific practice. And can I just get back to the point about
I'd just like to quickly
hang on, about the birds and the sun and all that. You see, again, this is a materialist prejudice. I think God sustains the birds in the sky.
Sure.
I believe that God causes the sun to rise and set. I believe that God causes everything in the universe. How does that reconcile with science? Because science, in my view, looks at the physical cause and effects within that particular worldview. But it was never meant to be a metaphysical, philosophical explanation 100%. For everything.
But this is
so there's plenty of
me in a box with other.
I'll just wrap up now.
Sure.
So I think it's still very plausible to believe, increasingly plausible to believe, that God acts in our world, not like an absentee landlord who just sets the world in motion, but he, as Christians call it, continua creatio. God continuously upholds and creates and sustains the universe, including the birds flying and the trees growing and our thinking and everything. So it's not like the God of the gaps, it's the God of everything. So even the most mundane thing like a rock is evidence of God's existence. Why? Because it's a contingent object that requires a necessary being. Well, you know about this.
Yes,
not a cause. This is not Aristotle's first cause.
Yeah.
This is more like the Halam cosmological argument. Kalam okay. You know what I'm saying. So that is kind of, for me, this is probably a philosophical disagreement ultimately, not really a question about mechanics or mechanisms.
So this is my point.
So that's my point.
So there's a few things. The first being that when you say Western science and you say Western scientists, there's a very important distinction there. Because to say that because I adhere to science, I must adhere to the beliefs of Bacon or Hobbes or whatever, is not fair, right? I'm totally agnostic on the existence of God as as this God of this creator God, but does a non-interferential God. It doesn't interfere in the world.
Yeah.
It creates the universe in the way that it will exist, and it continues to evolve throughout independently. However, to say that not only am I not making an anti-metaphysical claim, I'm just saying that your metaphysical claim isn't sufficiently justified to make it as a true claim about the nature of the universe.
Justified by what terms? By what criteria?
In any sense.
There's physically not claimed?
There's no causal justification.
You mean material? You mean material cause?
There has to be some. If something is material,
no, seriously.
If there's a material phenomenon, then it has to be explained through some material mechanism. Now, whether or not that mechanism is cause of a god, maybe there's a.
Are you saying all matter? Are you saying everything in the universe is material?
No.
Right. What about your thoughts? Are your thoughts just material?
I would say yes.
Really? But no one's ever seen your thoughts. Absolutely. It's possible scientifically to see your thoughts.
Absolutely. I believe it's some kind of emergent property, but it's hard to explain. I don't know because science hasn't got there yet. But
why can't they be non-material properties?
They possibly could be.
No, but why can't they in principle? In principle, why can't there be?
There's no reason in principle why they couldn't.
Well, there we are then.
But I can't say that they are because I haven't got a sufficient reason to justify.
But how would you find out if they were? What methodology would you adopt?
I couldn't say.
But you already have said. What's your name, by the way? What's your name?
Leo.
Leon. Leo?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Leo, you've already given us your methodology. You said it's materialist. And I'm saying, but you've admitted that there could be thoughts in your mind which may not be explainable by materialist criteria. So therefore, non-material phenomena in the universe might exist.
Might.
Yeah, but they might not be accessible by the materialist explanation.
They might not be.
Precisely. So all I'm saying is that there are such phenomena. There's abundant empirical evidence for them in all the examples I've given. Therefore, materialism is inadequate to explain them.
You're saying that they can't be explained through materialism, but what is empiricism if not material?
Oh no, very, very different. The empirical method is the inductive method. It has no metaphysical properties.
What way?
Well, a deductive argument is like a tautological argument. All unmarried men are bachelors, which is profoundly uninteresting, obviously. But an inductive one is like a synthetic. You have to go out and look.
Of course.
Now, I'm saying empirically we can observe deaf and blind people from birth who die, have amazing out-of-body experiences, observe accurately and fact-checked independently. They have these experiences. I'm saying that's an empirical observation that is now very well researched and published in the academic work. Therefore, can a materialist explain that phenomenon? Say, no, they've all been tested. What about drugs? What about the brain having a last spasm of activity? All this has been looked at and they found not to be credible explanations. So therefore, inductively, I deduce that these things have legs, if you like, as non-material properties. That's my technical term.
Bit of a contradiction to say to do something inductively now. You induce. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So my other point is that To say that science is fundamentally anti-metaphysical is a total misunderstanding of the
Western
scientific method.
science.
Western science, whatever you.
Well, not all of it, not all of it, but a lot of it. A lot of it. The dominant paradigm. Dominant paradigm.
So the fact, the existence of religious scientists goes entirely against this. You can have an understanding of the physical mechanisms of the universe and understand that it's entirely physical.
Newton.
You can.
Newton was very religious.
And you believe in God because you're not making any claims towards the metaphysical. You're not saying the metaphysical doesn't exist.
Actually,
you're not saying the non-physical doesn't exist.
Actually,
you're just saying
yeah.
that we have these physical phenomena that can be explained in terms of pure mathematics and science. We can explain them through
But Newton thought these were the actions of God.
Newton is 300 years ago.
No, but
But my point
no,
is
he's not. He's operating the modern paradigm.
No, of course he's not. He's not operating in Einstein's relativistic paradigm, which
no,
is totally
but
fundamentally
in terms of the
shifting our
scientific
paradigm.
method,
But
yeah.
the point being that you can adhere to the scientific method without making anti-metaphysical claims. And just to say that because I am using science as a basis to determine my beliefs, I therefore am making a claim against the soul is not what I'm doing. And I think I've repeated myself quite a few times to say that I'm not saying the soul doesn't exist. I'm saying that it doesn't seem to me a sufficient explanation for these phenomena to just say the soul is the reason. Because that, just the existence of the soul doesn't really explain anything. In the same way that just the existence of God doesn't explain how the universe came to be. God has to have created the universe somehow, right? Whether or not he thought it into existence, there has to be some way in which existence became a thing. You know, in which the universe came into existence, right?
No,
I'm not making.
Okay, well, we're going around in circles now, and I agree we are. And I think the empirical evidence suggests very strongly the existence of a non-material entity. Call it spirit, soul, consciousness, self, whatever you want to call it. I don't care what it's called. That is not explicable on materialist premises at all. But there's lots of empirical evidence for this, and this amazingly overlaps perfectly with the religious understanding that Jews and Christians and Muslims have about the soul. And I'm saying that this convergence between empirical observations and religious beliefs is one of the defining moments of our civilization, and now we need a paradigm shift away from a materialist understanding, which is dominant in the West. You may not agree, sure. I believe it is dominant in the West, from this to a post-materialist paradigm which can holistically incorporate all of these things and not attempt to explain them away as you have done. You talk about these kind of drug effects. All of this is unconvincing when you go through these possibilities. They have not been seen to be adequate explanations for this phenomena. So I'm calling for a new paradigm, one that is much more holistic, and I think it will happen. It is happening actually at the moment, particularly in the US, where you see these emerging scientific think tanks with very prominent physicists and chemists and others who are actively discussing these very issues. It's not some cranky thing at all. So this is great. This is great news.
What's your causal interaction explanation, right? Because in order for something to manifest in the physical, it has to have some kind of cause. In order for anything to manifest, it must have some kind of cause.
Well, you're just saying every effect.
Let me just lay out my premise.
Every effect is a cause.
Every effect has a cause.
I agree.
We agree.
I agree.
Physical causes produce physical effects.
I'm not sure I agree.
Okay.
I don't want to be shot down by my Muslim brothers here, but for the sake of this argument, I'm going to defend the Asherite occasionalist argument. Any Atheries watching this, please turn away. I'm just letting you know I'm going to defend a version of the occasionalist argument. You probably didn't understand what I said. Okay, so I'm actually going to maintain what I just said and deny
Please.
what. Yeah.
Okay.
I've just given.
I'd like to know the justification.
I've just briefed my brothers here about what I'm doing. Yeah.
I'd like to know the justification, but aside from that, every effect has a cause.
Yes, I agree with that.
In order for something to manifest in the physical, it must have a cause, right? This effect, this phenomenon of NDEs.
But it may not be physical. It may not be physical.
Okay, so it may not be physical.
No.
But if it's not physical, then through what mechanism do they interact? How can a non-physical produce an effect in the physical? In the same way, how does my having a thought, if it's non-physical, affect my body? How does me wanting to lift my arm mean that my arm lifts?
Exactly. Oh, the system wants to say something.
Sure. Are you wanting to put your arm on is actually linked to something that's going on.
But exactly, my point is that it's just the brain. My point is that you need the brain to justify you lifting
You
your
are a
arm.
materialist.
And so
You deny you are, but you are.
No, I'm a
You're-
materialist. Without a doubt, I'm a materialist.
Okay. Well,
From what I understand of the way the world
I'm
works.
an idealist. I think this idea of physical
So yeah,
causality.
it's an axiomatic problem, right? We're operating on different axioms.
Well,
And
it's
that's
a
all
philosophical
the world.
difference.
exactly.
I think even alleged physical causality between two objects is actually not the right description, because I believe God brings about every event we see in the universe, and it is God's habitual way of creating that we call laws, like laws of physics. The laws of physics don't actually do anything. They are description of God's regular action, repeated action in the world, but of course, being God and it being sovereign, he can do differently. So in the case of Jesus, for example, it's impossible normally for virgins to have babies, but he did in his case, or in Moses' case, to part the Red Sea and do miracles. Because the laws of physics are not something over against God, they are actually our way of describing the habitual actions of God in the world. Now, this means that we can still treat the observable physical structures seriously, but ultimately they are not the real explanation. The real explanation is the action of God, actually.
So
physics has its own kind of artificial reality here.
Right.
The real reality is God is
So I think
the
this
actor in the universe.
This is my point: is that science and physical explanations for things do not make have no impetus towards the metaphysical. They have no.
I would say science itself needs a metaphysical explanation for its working.
Say again?
I mean, scientific method needs its own explanation, which
So yes,
Which
yes,
is in
you're
the
right.
realm
It
of his,
may or may not. But
philosophy
the
or
science
metaphysical
itself has no claim on that, right? It's the job of philosophers or religious scholars, and that it's in that realm through which we can make that decision. So in order to make a claim on a rationalist basis, it has to be rationally justifiable. Whereas this is something that purely depends on the axioms that you hold to be true. If you don't believe in God as a cause, you can find perfectly many explanations for why things are the way they are. If you believe in God, you can find equal and opposite.
But you have not been able to do that. I've mentioned a whole range of phenomena that you've not given any rational materialist explanations for at all.
But you-
for example, people with absolutely no brains left who suddenly become very conscious at the moment
But
of
no,
passing.
that's a misunderstanding.
And you're
of how
saying,
cancer works.
oh well,
the
well,
brain
well,
still exists. It's
but
just that it's
it
been.
doesn't.
Of course it does. The
No,
brain doesn't
you
just
see, of
become
course.
a tumor.
No, I'm saying the brain is virtually disappeared. There's no physical basis for consciousness left in these brains, according to the.
I'll need to read the literature.
You will.
As far
I
as
mean,
I understand
I
it,
don't
the
think you
brain
quite
still
understand how
exists in that
serious
way.
this is. We're dealing here with people who have virtually nothing left of their grey matter, who suddenly at the end of life become very conscious and aware and interactive and fully human again. This is an expression of their soul, their spirit, which has suddenly become their self, which is not identified with the material body at all. Ultimately, it's separated from it. And materialists would say, no, it's a product of the brain. That, I would argue, is a fundamental error which our emerging post-material science will actually recognise, actually. I think this is the future.
Well, so
this is the future of
We're
science.
postulating into the future, right?
We are.
We're not going to know until we know,
but
and we might.
Well, we know
never.
now, but
we might never. Know.
But
We would argue that.
the paradigm is catching up with this reality.
Well, we'll see.
Well,
I'd
we
love
will-
to
we will
read
see.
now. I'd love to see the literature. That
Yeah,
you're
of course.
talking.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
shoot you an email just because there's a lot here. This is.
No, I'd love to send you the
a very,
University
very
of
productive-
Minnesota research
absolutely.
by two academics and looked at this, and they went through all the possible explanations the materials were offered. They found none of them actually hold water.
I'd love to read the
actually.
lecture because it's very interesting. I mean, I think inevitably we are at an axiomatic difference. We just take different things to be true at the fundament, and so from there we derive different conclusions. And I don't think that's something we'll ever really have any light on, to be honest.
I think
don't
no.
we as humans
I'm
can-
hopeful one day you would change your paradigm.
We'll see. We'll see.
what's your explanation for working of science in explaining the nature?
For
Science works
yes,
in explaining the nature. I
it
mean, what
explains
does that
the
mean? I mean, what-
mechanisms through which nature operates.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now science involves reason.
Thank you.
you.
Cheers.
Science involves reason, observation, and then imagination.
Yeah.
Guess.
Sure.
Yeah. So now, working of science, what does that mean? I mean, what science is working. Does that mean?
Science works
does
because
that
it's
mean-
designed to work. Science works because it's falsifiable.
No. Now say that the nature is running randomly without following any law.
Then science wouldn't work.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be
so
science. But it
that-
does have laws,
yeah, so
which is why
working
we're
of
able
sign,
to.
yeah, working of sign means the science means that this nature is rational.
What does he think about
Finish.
We didn't get. I didn't mention the
How things
we didn't get involved in that.
not why they work, but how they work. Step back to the camera.
Yeah.
So
So,
far.
now, so the nature is the effect of working of this ability, which is manifesting sign of consistency in its work. It has sign of invention of concepts like mathematics. Otherwise, you have no. So now, so how would you describe or characterize or term this ability, which is working behind the nature to make us and things around this? I mean, if we take basic definition of intelligence, ability, invention.
I'm gonna
No
go
problem.
in a minute. There's no
Yeah,
point.
yes, invention capabilities. So now we say that if look at me, how will you say that I have intelligence, I have rationality, I have free will, just by
Well, I don't know
analyzing?
about free will.
Yeah,
I don't believe
just okay, leave that. But just by looking at my actions, by analyzing my actions, if you see consistency in my action, yeah, if you see the ability, my different abilities to move something or kind of thing in a particular manner or rational or logical or consistent manner, then you will say I have certain level of intelligence.
Sure.
And then if I can interact with the nature or kind of, you say that I have some kind of awareness. Yeah, that's how you say that I am an intelligent free will. Or if you say that free will, you may define free will in a sense that I have certain unpredictability which you cannot predict.
Sure.
But after I do after my performing the work, you can say that however he has made this work randomly initially, but after the work I see there is a pattern. Like some painter, when some painters are like
So
this.
is the point
yeah,
that God must be the cause?
No, I'm not going to that initial.
What is the
I am
possibility?
saying that instead of going to explanation, I am analyzing and recognizing the effects.
Yes.
Yes. Now I find degree of intelligence, kind of free will, whatever we say, we attribute for ourselves. These type of attributes are already by justice should be given or can be ascribed to this ability working behind nature or bringing us
So
to
you're
us.
saying that nature,
Even for our consciousness.
necessitates intelligence. I would beg to differ, because if there was a universe in which the laws of nature were inconsistent, right? They changed on different places. That universe would cease to exist. It would not be coherent, and so it wouldn't be able to exist. It's like when people make the intelligent design argument towards humans, right? Humans are so well suited to their environment, they must have been designed that way. But given that we are fit to our environment, of course we're fit to our environment, because if we weren't, then we wouldn't be here. Right? If we weren't adapted to our environment, if we hadn't evolved to suit the environment in which we were, then we wouldn't exist. So to say that the universe must have some intelligent design, well, there could have been infinite universes aside from ours, but they don't continue to exist because they're not fit for it. Right? It's only this fine-tuning argument works both ways. Either the universe is fine-tuned, or we are in the universe because we suit it.
Okay. So your argument is that
But I think I think you are contradicting yourself, because at first time when he said to being in a universe which is consistence requires energy, and behind this universe, to be in consistent universe, he said rationally, you said
I said
regular. Yeah.
regularity.
To be in a regular universe, we have the work behind this universe, right?
What do you mean behind the universe?
at least to
Like the energy. He said the energy
Yeah, but
has
that's
to be
entirely
there.
within the universe. That's within the universe. It only
whatever
within the
it may be,
physical
whatever.
It requires within the universe, even within the universe.
has to be energy.
Yeah,
Yes.
there has to be the energy.
order for anything
So
to happen,
which
of course.
is outside of the science, isn't it? Which is outside of the science, because we are getting science because the universe is there.
Yes.
If the universe is not there, we are not getting the size, because size is depending to the nature of the universe, whatever
Yes.
you call it, but the universe is not.
Science is working for the effects alone, but the actual nature of the things.
The nature of the thing is a metaphysical
Yeah, like you
question.
have
It's an
you have
epistemic-
termed,
it's-
yes,
it's,
you have
something we can't know.
you have
It's something we
nicely
have to
termed the concept. You have brought the concept of quantum mechanics. In quantum mechanics, we face the problem because the real thing may be different, but when
Exactly.
we try to describe,
we have a best model to describe
yes,
it, but
yes,
we don't explain it.
nice,
Describe
very
the-
excellent,
This is
excellent,
what I was
excellent.
saying to the guy that I was speaking
Excellent,
to before.
excellent,
I was saying
excellent.
that it's a metaphysical claim which science makes no judgment.
Yeah. However, we can within the quantum mechanics, we can differentiate different aspects.
Sure.
You know, clearly with certainty.
Yeah.
Like electron has up spin, down spin kind
Yeah.
of thing, universal charge, and proton has a positive charge,
course.
electron has negative. These kind of things are certain.
Yes.
You know, even the definition, some definition laws are, certain. Now, with same argument, even if there is metaphysical aspect of it, by analyzing the effects, we can ascribe or describe through our language this metaphysical cause or something behind this nature. Like energy, it is ability, but it is defined only through its effects. Like energy, you cannot see it, you can hear it, you cannot touch it. Only the effects you can do these things, on effects you can do these things. So my argument would be, my argument is irrespective or not dependent on whether a universe can exist with regularity or not regularity, because you can have a reality or ability. Ability can make things happen in a random way.
Yeah.
You cannot, as long as ability is there, it can make something happening.
Sure.
It may not make
have to
sex.
follow.
Yeah. So,
But
likewise,
so what's the argument? What's the point?
so the point is that as long as I see the regularity of pattern and some the outcome is meaningful, you know, and the abilities behind it is given all the possibilities of universe. Even if one universe contains that, the whole possible reality contains, as per our definition, the sign of intelligence, rationality, and ability. So combining this, we can say this agency.
Sorry to interrupt. Have you prayed Maghrib?
No, sir. Let's
Okay.
go.
We
Sorry.
need to pray Maghrib. We have
It's
prayer
okay.
time.
I have to leave anyway.
Yeah.
Wait,
So
wait,
think
what was
about
your
that.
name?
Gulam Sharar, we team work with dawahs.
If
Yeah,
you can see the videos in dawah wise, if you write the dawah wise,
Yeah.
So my point.